Hello YouTube, my name is Odira Kagendo and I'm bringing a new video to you. This is the third edition. I actually thought of numbering my videos, but I decided not to so that I don't know, I feel like it somehow will pressure someone. You're number one and you're like, I need to get all the way to number 15 if the series gets that long. I'm not sure how many texts it will take to cover everything I need to cover. But anyway, that's not the point. As I mentioned on the last video, we're going to go through the project we're going to do for this Lagom in Scala series today. So, a bit of a shout out. I got this project from Andela. These are bootcamp projects we had earlier on when I was working here for when they were getting new people into the company, and I liked this compilation and I thought I could just use this as references and as good outlined project description. So, um, yeah, let's do that. So, yeah, that's a bit an endorsement of Andela. Of course, they're not paying me. Of course, they didn't ask for this. I just thought, hey, shout out. Thanks for this. Anyway, back to this. So this was a console application. I said the project was going to be a class attendance register. So what I'm going to do is just copy this whole thing. And then I'm thinking either having it. This annoys me sometimes. Okay. That's sufficient. Let me just create a new document. I thought about using notes, but I don't want people to look at my notes. I don't know, but then editing on Word in front of people usually also feels, oh no. People will discover I'm not so good at this word thing. But hey, no judging. All right, let's do this. So, class attendance, register. I've been meaning to switch my laptops to a better one, but I think I'm also used to the issues with this one. So, I guess you get attached. You get attached to, is it Stockholm syndrome? Okay, I've had these problems for so long, and now that I have a solution for it, I'm hesitating to jump into the other solution. Anyway, enough about my life. So let's go through the project. As I said, class attendance register. It was a console application, so that's why the descriptions have this vibe of check-in, fixing an argument of student ID, and another one for class ID. So it was meant to be a console application. Actually, yeah, in doesn't matter the language you use, but yeah, it was ideally for Python for this case. So you'd have used docopt. What was the other one? Not the point. Let's go through the project, the bare description of it, and then we can keep adding or changing things to it if we need to. Anyway, the class attendance register is used to check in students when they come into class. So far we're getting these two people or class or big concepts. There's a class and there's a student. To be able to do this, we need to have the following commands. So check in a student into a class, according to the command at least. So that checks in a student into a class at the current time. A student once checked cannot be checked into another class except the class they. I will not participate in a word that doesn't include me. So English actually uses they for plural. So it's not specific. Anyway, not my point. A student once checked cannot be checked into another class except the class they have been checked into has ended. Anyway, the next command, check out a student from a class, giving a reason. So this is a first checkout, a student. So that's why you need to give a reason. Why is it a hospital thing, a medical thing? Yeah, whatever reasons passed for your school. At least I think for us only medical or someone visited. I was in a boarding school. Log stats class IDs. This creates a new time log for a particular class. This and then login. This creates a time log for a class that has already been started. Student add. This command creates a new student in the database and generates an ID for the student. Okay, and then another command. This command, that is student add. Add in the student details. This creates a student. This command creates a new student in the database and generates an ID for the student. Another one, of course, you can see, so at the risk of pointing the obvious, student remove, but the student ID. This command deletes a student based on the student ID. Then class add, class details. This creates a new class in the database and generates an ID for the class. And then similar to student, you remove the class, and then you can also list all the classes with their status. So shows the status of the class, shows the status of the class and the number of students in that class at that moment. So if the class is in session, how many students are there? That's all. If it's not in session, nothing. And then last but not least, student list. So list of the students and if they're currently in class. Before we get to everything, it does look straightforward and everything, but let's define the state for these people, right? Yeah, that's something we can, we want to define all the commands we'll have. So far we have the commands actually, but to change the commands, we need to be able to change the state. So we've established, at least we've seen two clear states here. So there's a classroom, that is a class, the room itself, or whatever. We can use classroom, or we can, and then the other thing is a student. So let's first go through classroom, get all the details that a classroom entails, and then we can go to a student. So these are some of the properties, as you call it, of a classroom. So we've seen it contains a class ID. Let's use an UID for this. This can be a string or UID, whatever you choose. Yeah, let's work with that. Class name. I'm assuming our classes have names. I'm going to name them in a Scala way, but okay, this is just system design. It's nothing to think much about. Another thing we've seen about a class is it can be active or not active, right? So class name, of course, string. The next thing is it an active session? So let's call it is in session. I think that works. Yeah, is in session. The reason we're doing all this is, as I mentioned, you're in charge of doing all the marshalling yourself. So of course you'll need to set up how you have to in this case we're going to use JSON. We're going to set up how our our classes, our objects, our Scala objects in the application translate into JSON. So the work into that. So of course, you have to clearly define the specific arguments for each of these so that when you go to the actual code, all that is defined for you. Anyway, I find it's good practice to always start with system design anyway, at least for the both low level and high level. But of course, already we have the high level work done for us, so it's more of a bit of granular ironing out. So session starts, because as you can see here, log start for the class. So this creates a new time log for a particular class. So we need to track when the class started. Let's put timestamp here. You can choose whatever you want. This is just system design. Feel free to implement or change it how you want. If you prefer using date time, if you prefer using instant time, up to you. So again, timestamp. Okay. What else? Is either of these optional? I don't think they are. Yeah. So the session starts. If the class is not in session, it will be none, right? So session starts. the class is, we found this class, it's not in session, so that means, so let's make this an option. The other thing to track is a list of all the students. We saw class, so we've gone through check in into a class, that's a student action, check out as a student action, log stats, this is a class action. That was me doing in quotes, but then I realized no one can see. Log end, and then adding a class. So that's not a property we need to add, of course. Is deleted is something because you get to remove a class, and then listing also list all the classes with their status, shows the student of the class and the number of students in that class. So for each classroom, we need to track all the students and the people in session, actually the number, so it will be just a count. So in this case we don't actually need the whole student object, we just can use the student ID for this. So in this case, a list of students, not really a list, let's use a list of student IDs since we just need a count. So a list of student ID, UUID. Let me just put, since here we're not, okay, which is UID. The next thing is to check if this class is deleted. Is deleted. So this is another boolean. And then I think it's good practice to not good practice. I think it's important to know when the class was created. So again, we have another timestamp object. Do we care about when it was updated? Maybe not. I mean, a class comes, is created, students are added, students are removed. I don't think updated that is information really care about, but just for the culture, let's have it in. If it's not relevant, we can take it out. So the next state we need to check on is a student. So we established the student as a UID. So that's of type. Of course, you can now use ID. I just ideally usually prefer using UID because I feel it's easier. Like someone can't easily derive the pattern from your database of, oh, this is the next person, oh, this was ID one. Again, that's why I use student UIDs. I feel it's easier. It's harder to predict the sequential order of the people, the items on your database, or ideally. That's not that deep. Of course, this is just for test cases, but why not use something that feels good? So student name, the string, and then we need to check if the student is in session. So we saw a student is checked in or checked out. So the moment they're checked out, so a student will be in class except for this when they're removed from a session. That is a forced checkout. The other case, of course, is when the session ends. So if there's no class in session for the student, then they're not in a class. So let's create a variable, a property for the student called is in class. So of course that's a boolean. What else? Okay, I feel like we also need to track the current class of this student, if they are in any class. So that's something we can do. So let's because the list of the students and if they're currently in class. So don't really need to know if the current class in this case, maybe not. So I feel may not be so relevant for our specific use case of like to satisfy our needs. If we had a case where we needed to know the specific details of if this person is in class and if they're in class, what class are they in, then it would be great to have the class they're in, but in this case, we just need list of the students and if they're currently in class. So that's a yes or no issue. That's a true, false. So it doesn't matter. So let's not have that variable. So we also get to be able to delete students. So it's deleted. And then the common one created that, deleted that. Let me just copy all of this. As I said, I don't like. Okay, so, and then of course the commands, I don't need to repeat this, so I think I can just leave them as is because the system requirements state that we need to satisfy all these needs. So shift tab, shift tab. And that concludes a bit of our system design. So we've established the specific states, the properties of these big domains in our system. So the reason I picked this project is because we discussed how we can have two different services in our using Lagom in a single build. So in this case, we can have a classroom service and a student service because those are two different domains. We don't want to have a point where having like they're leaking into each other. So those are two separate things with their own things. So we could even go a step further and just have specific methods for class alone and then the specific methods for students alone, which in the as we're separating concerns. So let me actually do that. Classroom methods. Yeah, let me just do that. So they can check in, like their commands, the events, they're literally, yeah, manipulating the classroom. How do you do that? You can check in a student. So checks in a student into a class. So that's the next thing on classroom is starting a new log for particular class and ending it. So that's more on classroom. And then adding and removing a class and also listing them. So these are all the things that this class can do. They can do all these functions. And then, of course, let's also do the same for students. Functions, methods, capabilities, what they're supposed to do, blah, blah, blah. I feel like I've mixed in some data. So class add, class there, this creates a new time log for class. Check-in is to student, right? Checks in a student. So these, let's move this out of the class. Does checking in fall into, is it, but when you're checking out a particular student. So this is a student detail. See why we needed to do all this system design. So if you're going to check out and give, that's another thing to think about. Checks in a student into a class at the current time. So checks in at time. That means we also need to log when we checked in the student. So session starts, no, that's the classroom. So student name is in class is deleted. Check, so is in class, and if they're in class, when were they checked in? checked in time. So an option of type timestamp, because if they are not checked into any class, then it should be none. And then checked out time, and optional reason. So checked out time. So in this case, for checked out, we need an optional reason because is in class. But no, we can track checked in time. Let's see. Okay, checks in a student into a class at the current time. A student once checked in cannot be checked into another. Force check out at a student from a class, but a reason must be provided. So I don't think we really need to provide a checked out time because there's also these sessions, like session start and session end to track. Like once the session ends, all the students should be checked out of the class anyway. So these are all details that should be changed. So what we can do is check out reason. We don't per se need to track the checked out time for this scenario. That's not a need we have at the moment. We'll go through one more time the requirements to see if that's so. Reason, of course, which is string. All right, a quick perusing through it. The class attendance is used to check in students when they come into the class. To be able to do this, we need to have the following commands. So log start, this creates a new time log for a particular class. This ends a new time log. Log end class ID, this creates a new time log. This ends a time log for a particular class that has already been started. So I feel like when starting a log, another thing we should add is the time for that class. I feel that would be nice, but that's follow what was in the requirements. It just creates a new time log for a particular class, and this ends a time log. So does that mean the class will stay indefinitely until log end? Like, shouldn't it have session time, right? I feel like that would be a better structure for this. But anyway, let's assume it's manual. These are things you can keep changing as you go if according to your system. Again, this is just an example system. This ends a time log for a class that has already been started. Class add, this command creates a new class in the database and generates an ID for the class. That's pretty straightforward. You give it the class details, that is the class name. I think it's mostly the class name because most of these other details are more of they're more going to be changed later, so we don't really need to work on that to track that at the creation point. So, and then class remove, this command deletes a class based on the class ID. Class list of the classes with their status, so we show the status of the class and the number of students in that class at the moment. On students, student add, this command creates a new student in the database and generates an ID for the student. Again, remove, that's pretty straightforward. List of the students and if they're currently in a class. I'm not going to check in a student into a class. So this is subject to a student, checks in a student to a class at the current time. So we need to track the time here. A student once checked cannot be checked out into another class except the class they've been checked into has ended. So you only check, before you check in someone, you need to ensure that they're not in another station. So first check out a student from a class, but a reason must be provided. That's what I was wondering. Don't we really need a time slot for this? But anyway, log end works for now. Let's work with that. That ends the session on system design. The next video we're going to be covering creating the SPT project and work with actually implement the application, but this time just focus on memory data. We're not going to persist it to a data store. We'll keep advancing as we go. So at this point, we're really not going to have persistence going on. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope to catch you next time. Until next time, I am Waithira Kagendo, and have a good time, day ahead of you, night ahead of you. Bye.